In this lesson, we will be looking at the race for empires, the competition between European powers, mostly originally competing with the Spanish and Portuguese uh, to colonize and possess part of the Americas for their own benefit. Big idea under the race for empires is that other European nations challenged Spain in the Americas. Main ideas: the Protestant Reformation led to conflict in Europe in the 1500s. Conflict between Spain and England affected settlement of North America. And European nations raced to establish empires in North America. Martin Luther was a German priest who protested the practices of the Catholic Church in 1517. His actions led to a religious reform movement called the Protestant Reformation. Reformers, therefore, became known as Protestants. And the event that kicked off this Protestant Reformation is depicted in this photograph here, which is a still from a movie from 2003 called Luther, in which the British actor Joseph Fiennes is depicting Martin Luther. And it shows Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to the door of All Saints Church in Wittenberg, Germany on October 31st, 1517. These 95 Theses were basically complaints that Martin Luther, who was a Catholic priest, had against his own church. And by making these complaints public, he's challenged the authority of the church, which was something that you were not really allowed to do. He put himself in terrible danger by doing this. And a lot of people agreed with him, and an awful lot of people joined this reform movement, trying to get the Catholic Church to reform itself, to look at itself more critically. And this kicked off a long period of strife and turmoil in Europe, in which many religious wars would end up tearing Europe apart over the next 100 years or so. Main idea one: the Protestant Reformation led to conflict in Europe in the 1500s. The printing press, a machine that produces printed copies, helped spread Reformation ideas. Conflict between Catholics and Protestants in Europe often led to European civil war. King Henry VIII defied the Pope and founded the Church of England, or also known as the Anglican Church, in 1534. Now, Henry VIII is an interesting character because he had at one time been a fierce opponent of Protestantism, and he had actually come out against the Protestant Reformation publicly. He had actually written a book about why the Protestant Reformation was wrong and why people explained why people should remain loyal to the church. He was even hailed by the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church, as being a defender of the Catholic faith. And yet, in 1534, he broke away from the Catholic Church to form his own church. And the reason why he did this was because he sought a divorce from his wife. And his wife was the daughter of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain, the monarchs who had given Columbus permission to sail across the Atlantic to try and find a new trade route to Asia. Her name was Catherine of Aragon. And she had originally been promised in marriage to his older brother. Well, Henry's older brother died, and Henry was forced by his own father, Henry VII, to marry Catherine to seal a treaty of alliance between Spain and Great Britain, two great Catholic powers. Henry was forced to marry Catherine, who was 21 years old when they got married. Henry was only 16. And he came to believe in later life, after having children with Catherine, all the male children of which had died, either in childbirth or shortly after being born, Henry came to believe that he was being punished by God for marrying the woman who had been promised to his older brother. And so he sought a divorce, and the Pope wouldn't grant him one. he wanted to get his marriage annulled as being an offense to God, and the Pope would not grant that either. And Henry, being Henry, decided that if he wasn't going to be given his way, that he would simply break away from the Catholic Church, create his own church, and give himself a divorce, which is exactly what he did. And this, of course, will lead to a great deal of conflict between Great Britain, well, England at the time, and Spain, because it will cause the Treaty of Alliance between England and Spain to fall apart, and the two will end up going to war with each other. Focus question number 1. How did the Protestant Reformation lead to conflict in Europe in the 1500s? Main idea 2. Conflict between Spain and England affected the settlement of North America. King Philip II of Spain used Spain's wealth to lead what was called the Counter-Reformation against the Protestants. Philip sent a fleet of naval vessels, that is a huge invasion fleet known as the Spanish Armada, to England to overthrow Queen Elizabeth, the daughter of Henry VIII, and to destroy the Anglican Church and force England to become a Catholic nation again. The smaller English fleet, to the surprise of all, defeated the Spanish Armada, and Spain was also weakened by economic problems, including inflation, an inflation that was oddly enough caused by the enormous amounts of gold and silver that Spain was taking out of the Americas. Inflation, and this is something we're going to learn about in detail later on, is the rise of prices of goods caused by an increase in the amount of money in use. So much gold and silver was in circulation that the value of it actually went down, and this caused economic problems that would plague the Spanish Empire for the rest of its existence. England, France, and the Netherlands would then challenge Spain for its power in the Americas. According to a treaty that had been negotiated by the Catholic Church way back in 1494, called the Treaty of Tordesillas, Spain basically had possession of all of the Americas. Portugal got a little bit at the tip of what is now Brazil, but Spain was supposed to get everything else in North and South America. England, France, and the Netherlands chose to ignore the Treaty of Tordesillas, as it basically was not seen as applying to them, and they went and did what they wanted anyway. Here we have a depiction of some of the ships of the Spanish Armada, again defeated by the smaller English fleet in 1588, and this is at the point where England begins to challenge Spain's power, and other European countries, of course, follow suit. Focus question number 2. How did the conflict between Spain and England affect the settlement of North America? Main idea 3. European nations raced to establish empires in North America. There was a scramble amongst the major seafaring powers of Europe to establish their own claims to territory in the Americas. France laid claim to the area along the St. Lawrence River, which is on this map in orange, where I have my little cursor here. And this would extend to the area around the Great Lakes and included the Mississippi River Valley all the way down to this area in orange down here by the Gulf of Mexico, what is today parts of the modern states of Louisiana and Mississippi. The French here would establish a city at the mouth of the Mississippi River called New Orleans. The Netherlands claimed all the land between the Delaware and the Hudson Rivers, which is kind of mashed here together because it's very difficult to show, but we have the Hudson River here and the Delaware River here, and the Dutch claimed all of this land in between here, including what would one day become the city of New York, where I have my cursor hovering. When the Dutch had it, it was known as New Amsterdam, and the colony was called New Netherland. Sweden claimed an area along the Delaware River, so they were right next to the Dutch, and they had serious conflicts with each other over that. England claimed what would become known as Virginia and what would someday be called North Carolina, which would be right in this area. Here we have the area of Virginia and the area of North Carolina right here. The French Empire in North America. New France, the North American territory that spread out from the St. Lawrence River in the 1600s, included fur traders, explorers, and missionaries. They claimed the Mississippi River Valley and had a close trading relationship with Native Americans, depicted here in this print that actually comes from around the late 1700s, showing a French fur trapper trading pelts with a Native American. Now, these French fur traders, known as the coureurs de bois, or the runners of the woods, unlike the English, the French came to America and they settled down. And often these French fur trappers they understood that trade with Native American tribes became a familial relationship. If you traded with Native Americans, then it meant that you were their friend, and if you're their friend, then you are part of the family. And often these French fur trappers would marry young Native American women and become part of whatever tribe it was they were trading with. This is something that the English never did, where the French came and tried to learn to get along with Native Americans and become part of their family. The English came and, well, they did something entirely different, which we will talk about momentarily. Now, New Netherland and New Sweden. In New Netherland, the Dutch came to America for trade only. They settled land between the Delaware and the Hudson rivers. They established a settlement on Manhattan Island, which was purchased from local Indians, and they named the settlement that they built there New Amsterdam. New Sweden, colonists settled along the Delaware River, very close to New Netherland. They were the first to build log cabins. The log cabin, which is seen as being an American staple, is something that was actually brought here by the Swedes. Swedes also brought something else that is very important, which I'm glad they did. They brought us the waffle. And who doesn't like a good waffle on a Sunday morning? The Dutch conquered New Sweden in 1655. They seized possession of the Swedish colony, but they allowed the Swedes to remain. They didn't try to drive them out. They conquered New Sweden and then made the Swedish population there part of their colony as well. English settlement. The English founded a colony in North America in the late 1500s, starting around 1585. Sir Walter Raleigh received a charter, that is a document that would give him permission to start a colony, and he received this charter from Queen Elizabeth I. He sent an expedition that landed in present-day North Carolina and Virginia. It was actually 3 separate expeditions over a period of several years. The first 2 attempts to settle a colony were complete failures. The third was a different kind of attempt. In the first 2 attempts, they were all men. Everybody was male. The third attempt was the idea of establishing an actual community, and this third attempt would include men, women, and children, entire family groups. The third colony that was established was on an island called Roanoke in 1587, and that colony mysteriously disappeared. And here we have a picture depicting Sir Walter Raleigh, who was given permission to establish England's first colonies in North America. In July 1585, Raleigh sent a group of English colonists to an island off the coast of what is today North Carolina, and this pattern was repeated over and over again. The final attempt at the colony, what would become the Roanoke colony, included the leader of that expedition, a man by the name of John White, who brought his entire family with him, including his pregnant daughter, who would give birth to a child at Roanoke colony. and the child would be named in honor of Queen Elizabeth of England. Elizabeth was known as the Virgin Queen, and so the little girl was named Virginia, and so was the land that they were attempting to settle. Likewise, it would be named Virginia as well, again after Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. The Roanoke colony disappeared, and to this day we don't exactly know what happened to it. John White returned to England late in 1587 to pick up more colonists and bring them back to Roanoke. And when he got back to England, Queen Elizabeth had issued an order that all ships of the realm would remain in English waters to defend England against the invasion by the Spanish Armada in 1588. After the invasion was staved off, John White then was able to create a new expedition to go back to Roanoke, and in 1590 he sailed back to America, and when he got there he discovered that the Roanoke colony was abandoned. Everything was left pretty much as it had been. The only clue that was left behind, now the buildings inside the colony were basically gone. It was like the colonists had torn everything down and then carefully disposed of it. The palisade or the wall around the colony was still there, but everything inside was gone. And on a nearby tree was carved the word Croatoan, which may have indicated that the people of the colony had gone to a nearby Native American tribe that seemed to be friendly, the Croatoans. But we don't know what happened to them. No evidence has ever been discovered. Nothing is known about what happened. And so because of that, the Roanoke colony can truthfully be said to be the ultimate hide-and-seek champions of all time. Focus question number 3. Describe the how and why European nations raced to establish empires in North America. The essential question for the race for empires: how and why did other European nations challenge Spain in the Americas?